oh, like, hey, you're that comedian guy. Say something funny. And then I'd say, well, what do you do? Well, I have an asphalt business. I said, well, I'll tell you what, you come and pave my driveway and I'll walk along the paving machine and I'll talk funny the whole time.
How do you build a network, run a profitable business, and make an impact? Oh, and have a personal life at the same time? That's the question, and this podcast is the answer. I'm your host, Chaz Wilson, husband, father of 5, author of the book 5+1, president and co-founder of Master Networks, Inc., a national networking organization. Look, each week I bring you successful entrepreneurs who will share success strategies of how to effectively build a network, add valuable wisdom to your journey, and help you succeed. Welcome to Connect, Share, and Prosper. All right, everybody, today on Connect, Share, Prosper, welcome to this episode 81. We are privileged today to have Damian Mason on our podcast. On this episode, we're going to dive deep into some entrepreneurial success traits and some other things like that. But let me give you a little background. He lives on a farm in Indiana, spends most of the winter in Arizona, which I'm from the Midwest. I love, now I'm from the South. I love the weather in the South. He's the author of Do Business Better, which we're going to talk about here in a second. He's spoken to over 2,000 audiences in all 50 states and 7 foreign countries. He's the host of 2 business podcasts himself, The Business of Agriculture and Do Business Better. Please welcome to Connect, Share, Prosper, Damian Mason. Hey, welcome to Connect, Share, Prosper today.
Well, thanks for having me on here.
Hey, so let's jump in. So you mentioned to me right before we started that you have a background as a comedian. How did you start as a comedian?
Okay. So
the way just always funny?
Yeah, I think you are. There's people that talk about teaching someone to be funny. There's comedy friends of mine that teach comedy classes. And I'm like, hey, if you are funny, I can make you funnier. But if you were voted most likely to become a librarian, I probably can't do much with you.
Right.
So I was always funny. I was raised in a large family. I was the youngest of 9 children. So as I point out, you learn timing when you're around a crowded table of loud, aggressive people. You got to make your lines work. You got to make them stick, and you got to deliver them very succinctly. So I learned timing, I guess, as a kid. I had the ability to imitate people. I had the ability to be funny, and there's a certain thing about that too. You say something that other people are like, hey, that's kind of an ass, but you can say it funny, and so you get away with it. So I was always a funny kid. In 1994, I quit my job. I was a corporate sales rep working for a large corporation selling lighting fixtures. I had won a Halloween costume contest where I dressed up as Bill Clinton. And then my company thought that was really funny. So I could put on makeup and padding and gray hair and make myself look like Bill Clinton. And I could talk like Bill Clinton and say, hey, how y'all doing there, Don? And so I was funny.
Yeah.
So they started using me at trade shows and sales meetings. And then I quit my job to become a professional political comedian. So my foray into self-employment happened in 1994. I had 3 gigs lined up for the rest of my career, totaling $1,200 of gross revenue. And, there's old people who are like, well, man, maybe you should just wait until your company, which was Cooper Industries, which is now part of Ethan Corporation. Like, well, maybe you should stick with it for another couple of years. And your listeners are business owners, entrepreneurial-minded, freelancers, e-lancers. They probably get it. There's a certain point where you say, you're like, Ricardo, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to stick around here. And then it's the old thing of, people approach you then. I remember these 50-year-old guys who come up to me when I was on my way out the door after I'd submitted my resignation. Well, if I was 25, I'd probably do that too. I'm like, well, bullshit. You were 25 and you did not do that, right?
Yeah, right.
So I did it because I decided I wanted to be self-employed. I wanted to be creative. My 2 big driving forces were I wanted to be creative and I wanted to be in charge of my compensation more than I was in the corporate arena. So 25 years later, I took a political comedy thing that a lot of people thought was a lark, winning a costume contest, and turned it into a business. And if you get past the club level, when you're doing corporate events, you're being paid very well. And I've been in a couple of TV shows. I got my SAG card. I was in a couple of movies. So I turned it into a business. But what I learned then was you obviously can't rest on your laurels. Everything has a point in time. Political comedy act based on dressed up as Bill Clinton. Presidents don't last forever. We've got a term limit situation there.
Yeah.
But I find it funny. And one of the things I tell everybody is I would get done doing my act at some corporate event in Las Vegas, Kansas City, Miami, wherever. And there'd be 350 insurance salespeople there. And they'd come up to me and say, hey, that's really funny. What are you going to do when Bill Clinton's not president? They absolutely knew that my business was going to have to change.
Yes.
but they never thought about their own business having to change.
Yeah.
And so while I knew that what I did was finite, somehow they thought that everything they were going to do would just be infinite. And I'm like, and that's why I talk a lot about reinvention. Is one of the things I speak about now on the lecture circuit, if you will, because the time to reinvent is before you have to. And I thought it was going to be easier to transition into being Damian Mason than it really was. And there was a lot of years of struggle because the market got really good at knowing me as Bill Clinton, as a political comedy guy. And I don't do that at all anymore.
Wow. So much here. Guys, you're listening to Connect, Share, Prosper. I'm your host, Chaz Wilson, here with Damian Mason. We are like, this is so intriguing to me. So you're at this job, you're a sales job, and you find out you have this thing that you can, imitate, and you're doing these meetings, imitating Bill Clinton. And you say, I got 3 gigs. I got this job. I'm going to make this a business. I'm going to jump to that. Right. That's not unlike how a lot of people start their business, right? They have a couple of things, they have an interest and excitement, they jump to it. So you now are teaching about reinvention, which I love. I believe very much we reinvent. We've actually had several people who've been on the podcast lately talk about reinvention. Last week we had Sharon Lecter. She talked about not retire, but refire. And I loved that, kind of that same reinvention standpoint. So now you're out speaking about this to businesses. And I find it interesting. We have several people who listen to this podcast. You've spoken to over 2,000 audiences in all 50 states. How did you transition from comedy to, because sometimes when you're funny and you jump into the business world, maybe people don't take you seriously on a topic. How did you jump into that sort of comedy routine to now I can be an expert to speak on, business topics?
Yeah. And by the way, I really appreciate you saying that, because the one thing, Chaz, that you learn, I was a college educated corporate employee turned comedy guy. And
right.
I think that helps, because not because I'm in any way overstating the value of college or that you have to have worked in corporate, but having done those things. And also I started working when I was 8. I was raised on a dairy farm in the Midwest. I always had to work, and I always did work. I didn't come from nothing. I paid for my own way through college. I was a landscaper. I had my own window cleaning business. I worked in factories, bars, was a bartender. I mean, I just did all that. So part of being successful in anything, whether it is comedy or selling light fixtures or manufacturing widgets, is the work. And yes, work with purpose, and also work with everything. One benefit I believe that I have, and this helps you in comedy, is comedy really is being a professional observer. You see everything at a deeper level, and you just pay attention. Read a wide array of stuff, and then observe your fellow humans, and then you get up on stage and you deliver an observation with a point of view and a punchline. That's really what comedy is. So to your bigger point, then, my whole time when I was traveling around, I see people on airplanes over there playing video games, and I'm reading the money section of USA Today, and as well as the front pages of the New York Times or Wall Street Journal or whatever newspaper it might be for my punchlines, but also to be better read. I wanted to be rich, and I wanted to be independent, and I wanted to always get better. So part of that is what you're hearing and what you're seeing there. The other part of it, Chaz, is you don't get treated as, shall we say, legitimately or credibly as you should in comedy. There's this thing that my wife hears me gripe about it, because I still do presentations funny. And so sometimes like, oh, you're a comedian. I'm like, well, not anymore. I'm more of a business speaker guy, but that's fine. The problem isn't that people call me comedian. I don't really care. It's that they don't give enough respect to the craft and to the business. Now, you know that in any line of work, there are people that smoke weed and will mow your yard, and they call that their business. There's people that run lawn mowing like a business and have 14 trucks with a crew of 21 people, and that's how I look at comedy. There's people that never get past the club level, and they're sleeping on their buddy's couch, and they sit around and get stoned and eat Twinkies and watch Scooby-Doo all day. I always looked at this as a business, and I didn't come from much, so I always saved and invested, and then started buying rental properties, and that was the way I looked at it. This was the revenue to drive me building more of an enterprise.
I think it's interesting too, when someone looks at another who's really mastered their craft, sometimes that person makes it look really easy. And so then they don't get legitimized because, well, you're just natural or you make it look easy, and they don't see the behind the scenes. Or athletes, right? Sometimes they don't see the getting up at 4 a.m. and working, third time in the gym that day. And so I get what you're saying, right? And especially when someone is seen as funny, as a comedian, witty, sometimes that can, which is interesting, but it kind of removes that credibility that you said about the business. But do you think as well, I see behind you, you have the Do Business Better, your book. I don't know how recently you released that, but the book helps. I mean, it's a credibility factor that comes into this. And I know in your book, Do Business Better, which I'd love for you to share some things. I know you've got 4 traits of entrepreneurial success, and maybe you want to just touch on those for our listeners here, and how they can improve their business through these entrepreneurial traits.
Happy to. And one thing, because it's kind of almost so near and dear to me, I guess, one last thing before we get into that.
Yeah, sure.
And I know you're okay with it because we're having a good time here.
Yeah.
About comedy, what you said is so dead on, is that there's this thing that happens, and that's why I always kind of bristled a little bit, that because you make jokes, there's this perception that you are a joke, or that you treat your career as a joke. And so I'll give you an example. I've always made the point, hey, you're that comedian guy. Say something funny. And then I'd say, well, what do you do? Well, I have an asphalt business. I said, well, I'll tell you what, you come and pave my driveway and I'll walk along the paving machine and I'll talk funny the whole time.
That's right. Yeah.
Because there's this idea, you wouldn't say, oh, you're an accountant. Hey, I tell you what, I know we're at a cocktail party, but I went ahead and brought my files here. Do my taxes.
That's right.
Now granted, poor doctors do get that. Like, oh, you're a doctor? Boy, my hip. Okay.
Yeah. I've got this rash, right?
Yeah, but at least they get taken with credibility and seriousness. Yeah. And the problem with comedy is that you're supposed to be their monkey on a string. And so that's the one thing I guess I get defensive of. And again, I get it. Yeah. I ran it always as a business, and I always treated it as a business, being funny, when you run it as a business. And there's a reason you get to a certain point. So one thing that you talked about, I wrote this book. It released in April. This is not my first book. I mostly do speaking to corporate events now. I have a very heavy presence in agriculture because of my farm background. I own farms in Indiana. My degree is from Purdue in agricultural economics. So I work a lot there, but also for self-employed small business associations is a real good spot for me. I deliver presentations that are funny, but also make points. And my purpose on your podcast isn't to just be pitching me and my book and all that, because I know how that works.
Yeah.
But the value to your listeners, I gave a guest lecture at an entrepreneur class maybe a decade ago. And so at that point, I'd been on my own for 15 years. And the students all talked about being entrepreneurs, being small business people or big business people, and what it would take. Now, granted, they're just students, and so they haven't really been out and gotten their knees skinned up quite yet. And then they asked me what it took. I said, well, before I answer, because I'm the guest lecturer, what do you guys think? You've been in this class for a semester. And they all went around, they talked about the need for a formal business plan. And then they said, what do you think? And I said, I've never had one. I don't discount the need for some planning, and I certainly understand business plans. Here's the thing. They become very rigid. They become very long-term. And then also it's almost like a document that some people fall in love with. They invested so much time into their plan that now a year and a half down the road, they say, well, that's what our business plan is. I'm like, yeah, a lot's changed in that year and a half. Why don't you more just flow with what's working and capitalize on that? So that's my thing. I guess I then told the students, I said, I'll tell you what it takes to be successful running your own enterprise. If you think that a 40-year-old guy who has accomplished setting some money aside and I became a snowbird when I was in my late 20s, early 30s, because I always wanted to live between Arizona and my farm. So I said, if you want to call that success, there's always the issue of defining success, and it's personal to everyone. Yeah. I said, Chaz, it takes 4 traits: risk tolerance, it takes resilience, it takes vision, and what the hell else did I say? Risk tolerance, resilience, vision, and God dang it, I'm going to have to write this down. See, that's a good thing I got my book.
So,
And by the way, you can go in any number you want.
so I couldn't agree more. Risk tolerance, resilience, vision,
Drive.
drive. Thank you.
Since you and I already talked about work, I assumed that I didn't have to cover that. Here's what I guess you look at: risk tolerance, drive, resilience, vision. Put them in any order. You say risk tolerance first. I always ask people that run their own business, what one do you think is most important? So let's ask you, Chaz, which one of those four things: risk, drive, resilience, vision?
For me, it's drive.
Probably me too.
Yeah.
Because like I said, I was working from the time I was an 8-year-old kid. However, the older I've gotten, now I'm looking at longevity. You know,
Yes.
I want to continue to have my very nice high-end home in Arizona. And I want to have a lifestyle where if Lori and I want to go out and have sushi, we can have sushi. I want to continue to build. So now I'm looking at longevity. I just turned 50 years old. I've been self-employed for half of my years on earth, 25 years, and I'm just turned 50. So I'm looking at longevity. And what I think it takes to attain longevity, you'd say, oh, vision, of course. Maybe. You know what else it takes? I think it takes bounce back factor. You still get knocked down.
Yeah, I love that. So yeah, and I think they can change over time, right? You talked about risk tolerance. So maybe at the front end of a business, your risk tolerance, you have high risk, your drive's high. Maybe you don't have a lot of vision, or maybe you have high vision at the end of the business. I think these can change over time. You know, for me right now, I'd say drive and resiliency, because you know, you get these different stages of business and you grow. Guys, we're listening to Damian Mason here on Connect, Share, Prosper. If you have a question for him, please reach out. We see a lot of people hopping on right now. And so we're talking about business. And he just talked about 4 traits of entrepreneurial success: risk tolerance, resilience, vision, and drive. So if you have a question for myself or Damian, please make sure you put those there on the Facebook comments. I think it's interesting because they do change over time, right? And we hit these ceilings of achievement over time throughout our business. Go ahead.
Okay, well, yeah, to answer that, certainly when I quit my job and had $1,200 of revenue lined up, that terrified a bunch of my friends. And my friends that had normal corporate jobs. It didn't terrify me that much because I'm like, hey, I've always gotten by. I've never not worked. So I'll be fine. Now, there's the reality that you said they change over time. Now that you have your winter home and you have a substantial amount of money, you know, invested for you maybe back off a little bit. There was a time when I was willing to quit, you know, and chuck it all over $1,200 of revenue. Well, right now, $1,200 don't mean much to me, but I can tell you that I'm not going to risk everything I've got right now so I've probably backed off. I'm probably not quite as risk tolerant as I was 25 years ago, because the side of me that came from nothing doesn't want to go back to nothing. So there's that.
So I think it's interesting. Let me just hop into point. They do change over time, but I think too, the wisdom of it changes. So for people listening, so I just share an experience for me along the lines of what you said. You know, I achieved a certain level of success, and I think I did take my foot off the gas a little bit because that drive was initially the thing that in the business. And then I took my foot off and had some personal experiences with some health with my wife and some other things that came in where I was watching the cash get depleted pretty quickly, that in a place that I thought, hey, this is a good place to be. And now I have to reset my mind that maybe I need to be at an even higher place to reset, because you never know what could happen in life. And I think that this is just the cycles that you go through in business, right? Of what's happening. So, hey guys, if you have a question, I see a lot of people hopping on. We are over 280 live views right now. So if you got a question right now, please make sure you comment and we will get those questions asked. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there, Damian. I know you were.
Hey man, it's your show. I'm just happy to be on here. I appreciate it. Yeah, please do send stuff. You know, I don't know everything. You don't know everything, but we know what we know, and we know it because of what we've done. And to the 4 traits moving or evolving a little bit, I think that that's also just like your vision of success evolves a little bit. You know, there's people that go through their midlife crisis, and I think that's about some sort of unhappiness or whatnot. I don't know. But I do think there's a thing about perspective, and that's where the evolution of what success is, and then which one of those things is the right thing at the time. Resilience has probably been the biggest thing for me because I always was a worker, so I always had that. I guess I also had you're not going to beat me idea. What I did not have early on of the four as much was vision. I had it for a year or three saying, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to build this act. I'm going to pay down my college notes. After I pay down my college, I'm going to buy real estate. Then I'm going to buy more real estate. So I had that vision, but I didn't really see what's going on 10, 15, 20 years out there. But that's the hard part now is, you look and you say, where do we go next? And I don't mean next week. I mean next 5 to 10 years. And so I'd say the vision is the part that I'm trying to work on a little bit more now. And I don't know about you and your point in time, but that's where you probably get.
Yeah, I agree. So we've got a question coming in I want to share with you. So Victoria, hey, Victoria, love to see Victoria on here. She says, what process does your mind take to problem solve and adjust during the different stages of your life? What have you learned in the last 25 years that's made you better? Great question, Victoria. Love that.
That's a good question. Okay, problem solve, and then what have I learned in the last 25 years? I'm going to have to think about the problem solve part. Learned in the last 25 years, perspective. What you would just lose your mind over early on, after enough bumps in the road, ups and downs, successes, failures, you are, I believe, a bit more even keel about and you don't take failure laying down, but you also can perspectivize it, which I know is not really a word. You can perspectivize it. So Victoria, I would say that being able to put things in perspective and context is a big learning thing for my last 25 years. I've gotten, I don't want to say softer because that sounds like you are mushy and you just gave up. I've gotten less hard-headed, hard-edged. Yeah. In fact, Victoria, if you're really bored, you can go on DamianMason.com and you can look on my blog. And I did an article, 50 years on earth, 25 years running my own business, 5 lessons. Because in the summer, I celebrated my birthday, 50 years and 25 years down the, on the records for my own business. And I talked about the edge. My wife says, you're pretty tough. Everybody thinks, okay, because you were funny that you're laid back. You're the furthest thing from laid back. And it can be hard because my wife has a different personality. And I've had to learn, we work together, we live together.
Yes.
I've had to learn to back off some of that edge because that side of you that wants to jump across the table and kick the world's ass at some point, it's very hard on those around you to be that way.
Yes. I think so. First of all, guys, we're listening to Damian Mason here on Connect, Share, Prosper. Boy, we're about to see if we can hit 800 live views right now on this show. So I couldn't agree more. And I see your website up there, DamianMason.com. Is that where people can find you, follow you, Facebook, Instagram?
Yep. Yeah, they can find all my social media feeds there. They can see my blogs. They can see my own podcast, which is Do Business Better. And if they happen to be interested in food production, they can listen to The Business of Agriculture, which is all that's about the business of food production. They can see my articles. They can see video samples of me on stage. Yeah, I'd say that was the biggest one. Okay, she talked about problem solving.
Yes.
Okay, Victoria, I'm not sure that I'm giving you the exact answer. You face problems every day when you run your own business. Some days it's a financial problem. Some days it's a activity. You're not getting enough revenue coming in the door because it's not really a financial problem. Then it's a marketing problem. Sometimes it's your product mix. I've put out turds before. I've put out jokes that when I was a comedy guy that just absolutely tanked. I've put out, I used to do self-published books, and I've put out 1 or 2 that were below average. And then I've done investments and property deals trying to make a nickel on the side, and it blew up my face. So when you talk about problem solving, the problem every day that we wake up with is how to create the life and business by choice. And that's not really a problem, but with that come problems. I want the world to hire me. I want my investments to appreciate. I want these business endeavors to go smoothly. So when you look at problem solving, one thing that I do, I make my wife a sounding board. She's not a money-minded person. I am. She's not really a sales-minded person, but she delivers truth and critical feedback. Damian, you are doing this wrong. And some folks think, oh, you can never take, no. The one thing about my comedy background is I take feedback very, very well because of the objective is to create the life and business by choice. So
Yes.
what are we doing right? What are we doing wrong? And then also talk about problem solving. If you listen to lawyers, bankers, and accountants, you'll never do anything because all they ever do, you'll say, well, they're fixing my problem. Well, maybe, yeah, if you've got a legal issue, a lawyer will fix it. But I use them to fix problems with my taxes or with some legal thing that has to be handled or setting up your will or a property transaction. Use them to solve your problems. Do not ever use them to guide your business because they do not play offense. They play defense.
That's such a great, so I'm going to piggyback on that because the thought I had is when you're problem solving is that many people by default go to taking the problem and contracting. Like they go to a negative place, like how do I contract? And most often the answer when you're solving a problem is how do I expand something, not contract it. And to your point, one of my great mentors, which is what you just said too, you have your wife in a way can mentor and be feedback and a sounding board. My wife is very much that way. One of the only people on this planet who I can go and ask a question and she will tell me exactly the truth, 100% the truth, give me the feedback to improve. But guys, sometimes it's right. Like, early on, I had an attorney that said, well, you can't do that. And I said, no, I'm going to do it. You tell me how I can do it. Right. So it's not that I'm not like, that's fine. How do I do it? Oh, well, if you did it this way. So technically the long and short of it was I could do it. I just needed to do it differently. And so that's why, to your point, you can't have them run your business that way. You have to make those decisions. I love that advice.
Yeah, let's face it, if you're entrepreneurial, and you say, well, Damian, how entrepreneurial are you? You didn't start like 9 tech companies in Silicon Valley. No, but I also haven't had a real job since I was 25, and I've had various other endeavors, and I've kept this whole thing afloat for quite a while here. So if you're entrepreneurial, you're probably more entrepreneurial than your banker. Your banker thought it was a brilliant new innovation to have a drive-up window.
Yeah, right. Right.
They just don't think like us. We think in terms of what can I build? What can I create? What can I do? And they look at how can I protect?
Yes. Love that, guys. This is a great little soundbite. We need to make sure we get that little clip there about that we talked about here about 30 minutes in. So I want to ask you a question that I get, for our folks on here. We're if you're listening to this, please share this with your friends. I see Josie, Perry, Caitlin, Victoria, lots of people hopping on. Let's see if we can't share this and get this to 1,000 people watching this episode right now. And
fantastic, man!
Break a new record. Yeah.
Happy. Hey, you know what? I'll just keep giving you the good stuff, Chaz. You tell me what I'm doing right and wrong and right.
You give us the good stuff. So let me ask this question. Master Networks is a networking organization, and I think, you talked about having people in your life who can give feedback and like your wife who you can have as a sounding board. And I think the size of our network is important, right? So yeah. How do you're on a farm in Indiana and you live in Arizona part of the year. And I'm sure you have a network of people that have supported and helped. And what tip would you give our people of how they can expand their network?
Okay, I do have that. And, it's really important because when you are basically a one-man band with your wife in a part-time support role with you, it can be very isolated or isolating. Yes. Now, I don't mind. There's folks that think if you are comedically funny as a background, you're probably the world's biggest extrovert. And the truth is I'm not. I'm actually fairly introverted. My wife always tells people, because I bet Damian's just the life of the party. She's like, when he's traveling, he's in his hotel room working on his computer or reading. Until I go and do my actual events. So I'm naturally not a complete extrovert. I turn it on as need be. And I also haven't worked with, a pool of people for 25 years. So you work a little harder at it and you make sure that you aren't bashful about doing the sort. Meaning there are people that I hang around less than I did when I was in college, because what you had with that person in common with that person in college was that you both were drinking and trying to get laid. Let's face it, right? So now I have people that are my good friends that are in different roles. And if you are honest with them, remember, you can't keep going and doing withdrawals from that account. You've got to make deposits in that account. So they call me up and say things like, hey, I've got this idea. Or, hey, you want to get together? Not just the casual people that want to pick your brain over a cup of coffee. Here you go. Look up that article. I wrote that one a year or two ago. buzzards eat and pick the brains out of stuff that is dead, that's been hit on the road. I don't want my
Right.
brain picked.
Yeah.
Secondly, I don't drink coffee. I don't even like coffee. So I get that. What you got to do is give something. So
Yes.
I have people that have helped me, and then I say, man, what can I do for you? You know, I write a new book. I got a couple of good friends that I bounce it off of, and then I make sure if ever they need anything, I'm on call. So you got to make sure you're depositing as well as withdrawing. And also, don't be afraid to do the sort. There are people that need tossed out of the canoe. Just because you were buddies with them in 7th grade, they might be great today, but they also might be dramatic. They might be, their life is a disaster. It's time to move on, man. So that's good advice. Move on, chuck people out of the canoe and keep moving forward. Don't be superficial. Don't just hang around people because they, have millions of dollars, and that's, no. You don't do that. You just choose people that have the drive and the life ambition that you have, and then you give them a deposit, and then you take a withdrawal. I got probably a dozen people like that are really good for me. My wife even said, a couple of my good friends, she said, hey, make sure you get together with them every year.
Yes.
When you're sitting on the back porch, drinking beer and smoking cigars with them, the conversation is about business. It's about future. It's about aspiration. It's not dumbed down talk. So you got that. Tomorrow I'm going pheasant hunting with a very good friend of mine who I've known since we were kids. He's an attorney and a partner in his own practice. And so I talk to him about business. He asked me about business. We talk about this thing in life, talk about that thing in life. That's who you want.
No, I couldn't agree more. I think that level of growth when it comes from contribution. So what you're basically saying is you're contributing, you're depositing into their life, which is where those relationships grow. It's a powerful thing. So one other question we got here: who inspires you?
That's hard because, again, when you work for yourself, you're always on your own. And then you're on your own and you're kind of a motivational speaker about business. I'm supposed to be the inspiration to everybody else, right?
Which is why it's a great question. Who's inspiring? Who's inspiring the inspiring person?
Yeah. So I look at folks, and I don't care what they do. Of course, I have a couple people that also write books and are speaker people that are inspiring to me because they've done a good job with what the business that they run. And then again, some of those close friends that we talk about, I look at what they've built and what they've created. And there's the old thing, no amount of success at the office is worth having a disaster at home. I think it's important that we all say, this person is an inspiration because of what they've accomplished. And they also have the home life right. I just had a young man, a 31-year-old guy who's been he started his first business when he was 9. He's in the business of agriculture. I recorded him on my own podcast. Is he an inspiration? Well, he's certainly interesting to me because he started selling pumpkins when he was 9 years old.
Wow.
And has been working since he was 9. And I like to listen to that kid's story about, well, I looked at this and I looked at this. He was making these decisions all along and charting his own path. I like listening to business owners. When people say, yeah, well, I started this and here we are 41 years later, anybody that has strung it together for 25, 30, 40, 50 years, they deserve a dose of respect and patting on the back. Those people inspire me because they continue to do it.
Yeah. Guys, we've been blessed today on this episode of Connect, Share, Prosper with Damian Mason. Make sure we've added the link in the notes here to Amazon to get his book. You can go to DamianMason.com. You can find him on social media, connect with him. I love the stories. I feel like we could spend hours diving deep on all these topics. We'll probably have to have you back for another follow-up episode after the first of the year. Make sure you share this episode. Remember, every Monday, noon Central, on this Facebook page, Master Network's Facebook page, I bring you successful entrepreneurs like Damian who share their stories, share their struggles, share their successes to inspire, to motivate, and uplift each of us so that we, on the journey of entrepreneurship, right, that can be sometimes lonely. And today, we talked about those 4 traits of entrepreneurial success and the things that we need to overcome and who to surround ourselves with. And who we get advice from matters, the key people in our lives. So Damian, thank you so much for being on this episode of Connect, Share, Prosper. And again, remember, subscribe to our YouTube channel, subscribe to this page so you get notified every time we go live with guests like Damian. And we will see you guys next week on Connect, Share, Prosper.
Thanks for having me.